but since all of them are basically, except for Mrs. Diomande that didn't go over the time, but everybody else went over the time, so I'm just going to take the remaining time to go to the Q&A. That way we're going to have a discussion, and this will be also a time for each panelist to make a comment on the other panelists, to point. Okay, we're going to start with Mrs. Paulo.
I just want to make one point, and it's a clarification. I should have issued a disclaimer, as Dr. Gilpin did. I don't speak for the Africa Society in its totality. I can only speak for myself. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, because I think perhaps I was misunderstood in one point I made. I believe what President Obama believed, what we believed at the time of the election, what the international community believed, what the National Electoral Commission in Cote d'Ivoire believed, what the African Union believed, what ECOWAS believed, what the United Nations believed, and that was that Mr. Ouattara won the election. That is the premise. Now, following that, I'm about to say this. I don't have, as we say, a dog in this race. I don't know Mr. Ouattara. I've met Mr. Gbagbo once a long time ago, and I met Mr. Ouattara a long time ago. So I have no reticence whatsoever in speaking for what I believe to be true and for articulating my sentiments. I just didn't want that to be distorted. I think that our government and we in the United States have our own prism through which we view things.
And we know that.
Okay.
And so that's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Paulo. With that, we're going to take a few questions, unless the panelists have anything to say.
Can I...
quickly, 30 seconds, please.
Thank you. Can I come out to that very quickly? Whether it is, the disclaimer is very well accepted, right? But in addition to that, I'm speaking more of this organization. It's just, the Africa Society that I mentioned today. Yeah. But there is also the CSIS, I believe. CSIS. Right, with Jennifer Cook. Those organizations actually that I want to talk about, which have monitored the situation in the Africa Coast. And I'm talking more about the results of this monitoring. Right? That's why I said what I said earlier, but not anything to distort your views and your position. About the position, as I said, regarding President Gbagbo's claim that the French actually are involved in this. This is something that deep in the core, no Ivorian at all can deny. And I'm going back even to the first president, since his name has been mentioned in here. Before his death in 1988, as he sat with the former French president, François Mitterrand, he mentioned that. We cannot grow because we have been freed. He himself said it. So the French connection in the Ivorian crisis cannot be denied, it cannot be negated.
Okay, this is demanded.
Yes, I have to mention that it is so important to keep in mind the first president of Cote d'Ivoire. No government is perfect. Even right now with Obama has some, he always kind of confronts some difficulties. So the first president of Cote d'Ivoire, Houphouët-Boigny, did confront some difficulty. But I remember something. When I was a kid, we never had any issue with peace. I even remember when I was in school, when somebody pronounced the word weapon, this used to be a big deal. They used to say, don't say that. But now, when somebody hears weapon, even when they hear the noise of weapon, instead of running away, they want to see it. They want to go and see it. Cote d'Ivoire has changed. And that's why I'm saying we should let anything that divide us on the side and focus more on the things that unite us. This is very important.
Thank you, Mrs. Diomande. I think that's basically the premise of this meeting. Dr. Dr. Gilpin, do you have anything to say before we go to the questions? Okay. This is what we're going to do with our audience. The questions have to be concise and I should say even precise, because we want to make sure everybody has something to say. So don't keep the the microphone for too long, and we'll go straight to the point. That way, it's going to give time to our panelists to answer your question quite clearly. With that, since Mr.
It's going to be a comment. First of all, I wanted to thank you and congratulate you. That was a nice panel and very beautiful. And I did not hear Mrs. Paulo, but I could see what she said through Gilpin and to Dr. Eriketi. And I really, really loved the panel and what I heard from the economic perspective, from the political perspective, from the Bintu perspective, and even Mrs. Bernadette Paulo. Second thing, I was surprised to see on the panel, and I must congratulate her that she was brave enough, to come here, and among all those people who supported, the American prison, I think that she's one of the few, maybe the first, to come here and talk about what is going on in Ivory Coast from a different perspective. I'm really, really content, and I want to express that. Third, the only thing we can ask, everything is said, so the panelist, that was beautiful. The only thing we can say to Mrs. Bernadette Paulo and people like her, who yesterday were so sure that Ouattara won the election, or were so sure that Ivory Coast was going to be on the path of democracy, as now, they see what is going on. The only thing we can ask them is to plead. Here, Madam Bernadette Paulo, I'm pleading that, that I sent you the email I wrote you, that you can look deep inside of yourself, that humanness that you have, that all of you have, that all of us have, to try and help the country, so that, because you guys are the only people who can talk to Mr. Ouattara, so that he can try to do the right thing. Because, believe it or not, and Gilpin said it, the next crisis that is going to come in Ivory Coast, if nothing is done, I know it's going to blow on everybody's face, and that blood is going to be in the hands of all the people who supported it, and particularly Mr. Obama. So that's my plea this morning. Nothing to say, because you said it all, it's beautiful. So thank you very much. This is what I want to say.
Thank you, Dr. Nyaka.
There has to be equal application of the law. And just as those people who supported Gbagbo are incarcerated for their crimes, so too must the people who supported Mr. Ouattara. There also has to be a judiciary that's free and fair. So if you would have heard my presentation, but I think you caught that. I'm trying to be fair. I'm not aligning myself with
No, that's
either
fine.
side.
Congratulate you.
And, but I understand your point.
Thank you. Let's take Mrs. Aaron. Mrs. Aaron, maybe you want to make a comment.
Hi, again, I'm Christy Arm from the State Department, and if you can't tell by looking at me, I'm not a senior official, so I can't say anything on the record or official for the State Department. But what I can do, what I can do is, as the desk officer, I think about these issues every day, and it is really fascinating for me to be here and listen to all of you. I'm very honored to hear all of the different perspectives here. The first thing I want to say is that what you have all said has made clear to me. One of the things that has been in my mind is that everything needs to be done all at the same time. There's so many things. It's economic, security issues, reconciliation at the political level, reconciliation national level, local level. There's so many different things that seem to, from the conversation, need to be done at the same time. And I guess my question for the panel is, how do we do that? How does the Watchman's government do that? Where do they start? Is there some pieces of it that really do need to go first? Or if they need to do everything, how do you balance that?
Thank you. Yes, we want to take this.
Maybe the impression that was given is that everything needs to be done at the same time. I would call it an impression, because realistically, it is not possible, and technically, not everything can be tackled at the same time. So let me put that out in here. Though those issues issues remain very, the approach has to be a gradual one, right? The most important issue at this time, to quieten the situation more, is to work for some sort of trust, right? To be at least among the political actors to begin with. As I said in my presentation, today the divide is not just on the faces, it's not just on the lips, but the divide is way down in the stripes. Trust. And how do we establish that? The reason why in my presentation I gave what happened in the past in terms of forms of reconciliation, forms of forums that were created by the different presidents, especially President Ufobani and the others who came. We got built on that example. Number two, the crisis that we are dealing with today is not something that happened in the 1950s. Which consequences we are, suffering, and therefore we're trying to mend. This crisis is something that happened not even then 15 years ago. Which means that the actors, the victims are still present, and those victims, those actors have seen the way things were done in order to bring some sort of calm. What was done in 2001? Oh, I'm sorry, 2002. No, 2001 first. There was a National Forum of Reconciliation, which was less than a year, or less than 10 months, actually, after Mr. Gbagbo took over as president after the 2000 election. This is an atmosphere that is being created. Second thing that was done at that period was to allow the major political contenders who were in exile in France to return back home and security being provided to them. This creates trust. This at least provides opportunity for people to start talking. It's not happening today. Another thing that also was done, eventually, I'm talking about what security, and in 2002 and 2003, there was a major law that was taken. We can analyze that, and I'm ending on that, as being a mistake. Because there won't be any reconciliation again without justice, but at the same time, there needs to be trust. And how this trust was established, it was established by this amnesty law that was taken in 2003, which again was pushed while the discussants or the different parties were in France at what we call Babus. But at least it was taken. It did allow, over a period of time, for the different contenders to come to the table of discussion, because at the end of the day, that's what needs to be done. So this is what I can offer. We can look back at what it is, what we did, how far we went, and try to see how we can fix it, or what we can replicate and at least bring the parties together. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Eddie. Dr. Gilbert.
The issue with programming national reconciliation and post-crisis assistance is one that is fraught with tremendous difficulty anywhere in the world, because it seems as if you're drinking from a fire hose. Everything is coming to you at the same time. But one thing that you would find, the people on the ground understand this. They appreciate, as the doctor has said, that everything is not feasible at the same time. But what they do require is a modicum of predictability. They would like to know what's going to be done about everything over the next X number of years. But the challenge with the international community is that the instruments we have to assist, and here I'm talking mainly about from the economic and socio-economic side, are national instruments which are tied more to political reality in Washington, D.C. than expediency in any developing country or any recipient country, including Cote d'Ivoire. So that our planning horizon cannot be, by law, more than the length of the Congress. That's how we think. But the planning horizon to do all of these things requires a lot more than that time. So this is where we need a lot more coordination among all stakeholders, domestic and external, to divvy up the responsibilities so that people would know that the road is not going to be built this year or next year, but we do have a plan to do it in 3 years. That predictability starts building that trust. And the trust is not just between and among groups. there needs to be a fundamental trust between the governed and those in governing positions. And the way to start building that, which is, I'm not a political scientist, but will take you back to political science theory, social contract theory, is to start, engendering that predictability in the provision of not just services and projects, but also the provision of space for interaction. So I would say, don't despair. We understand it's not going to be done overnight, but there needs to be clear signals that the fundamentals and everything else are going to be addressed over time.
Thank you, Dr. Gilpin. Okay, with that, since the elder had his hand up long ago.
My name is Cote. I'm originally from Cote d'Ivoire, and I worked both under President Houphouët-Boigny, the first president, a trade rep in New York. I won't go into too much of an introduction, but I'm really saddened when I listen to some of the things said in the forum today. When you come from someplace, it is as if you said to somebody, my name is so-and-so, and they say, no, no, that's not your name. Your name is something else. But since we have to be brief, I would say with due respect, we should be talking about how to avoid genocide in Ivory Coast and not reconciliation. When you send armed people from Burkina Faso to take land from Ivorians, and I know what I'm talking about, in the forest, sacred forest, and others, when you just give away property of Ivory Coast to the first comers, when you kill over 200 people in a refugee camp, like happened in July of this past year in Diokwe, either you are sure you can do that with impunity and the slaughter continues, or people finally say, if I'm going to die anyway, I might as well die fighting. In either case, you're going to have bloodshed. We should be worrying about that. But since you decided to talk about reconciliation, it's a truth and reconciliation. And again, I'll be brief. Do not talk about reconciliation and forget truth. In South Africa, people who committed atrocity came up in the public and admitted it, and they went on to reconciliation. I am chagrined when somebody like Laurent Gbagbo, who for 30 years was in opposition, never took up arms, who when he came to power said, look, the way dictators maintain themselves is by starving the opposition. So I am going to, from now on, finance the presidential campaign of the opposition, and goes on and does it. When somebody like Laurent Gbagbo says, freedom of the press should be real, and not once puts a single journalist in prison, even though he's insulted by them all the time. When somebody like that is described by a respected person in the West as being a dictator, it hurts. It means they have no idea what they're talking about. Absolutely no idea. When somebody who traveled with you on the same boat as a Burkina Faso national, back then Voltaïque, because it was Upper Volta, when that person is held up as an Ivorian, even though his naturalization paper were never signed, it hurts. I don't want to take too much time, but any of you who has investigative interest, look at the Ivory Coast. Don't take my word for it. Go and do some investigation. You won't have to dig deep. And you say, oh, is that how we were misled? And it hurts because US is my adopted country, and I'm very grateful to this country. But to think that our leaders exercise the arrogance of power in the most horrific way in Ivory Coast, it is painful, beyond words. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Not be too talkative, but I think that what Maître said is profound in the sense that when we talk about the gradual approach to reconciliation, this is actually what we are talking about. There needs to be, today, a sane atmosphere that we call, right? reason why it ties back again to what Dr. Gilpin said in terms of creating space. Very important for dialogue, very important for whatever word we want to put in there, dialogue or talk or whatever it is, but there needs to be that space. And one of those spaces, or one dimension of this space is actually what he just touched upon, which is, again, in my presentation I mentioned that the land issue. The information I want to give in here is that the lands that he's referring to is what we have called classified lands or reserved natural lands in the Ivory Coast for the protection of the environment. Those lands are more respected by the natives of those areas than by those who come from outside. And the statistics that are provided by the official institution in the Ivory Coast called the SODEFOR prove that those reserved lands are occupied more by foreigners or non-natives than by the natives themselves. For many and multiple reasons. It is a sacred land, they are more respectful of authority and so on and so forth. And again, when those kind of things are not taken into consideration, when the silence is on that, there is a blackout on it, the same as there was a blackout on the 10-day trial that we witnessed at The Hague. All those things do not actually invent trust, right, to bring people to the table of talk and discussion. So that's just what I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Dr. Mrs. Barlow.
To the last speaker, we understand your point. I mean, I'm not an Ivorian, and I listened very clearly, carefully to what you said, and we'll continue to study the situation. But I wanted to say in response to your question, and on a positive note, this doesn't have to turn into a genocide. We saw what happened in Rwanda, in the healing that's taken place there. And it takes people of goodwill to formulate plans and to have discussions and to come together to avert something like that. I was very intrigued by your question about what would you do first. And I wanted to say, because it forced me to think about something that I didn't mention in my presentation. Do you know, we have in 3 days an election in Kenya, and we saw what happened in Ghana. I know the party chair of the NPP party, and also met the president of Ghana. But they had a court system, they have a justice system in place where their grievance can be redressed. Fortunately, no matter what happens in Kenya, and we hope there won't be violence, I also understand from what we've learned at the State Department and from Kenyans in the room, that they also have a strong court in Kenya. For me, the establishment of the rule of law and impartiality is very important at this juncture. And the beginning of this dialogue and trust, if you can establish a communication plan, I understand that the media in Cote d'Ivoire also is inflammatory by nature, and it's not an instrument that's helping in peace and in bringing about some sort of consensus. If you can begin with a communications plan where you start having this we as Ivorians and this coming together by the provision of information that is constructive to this end, that also can be helpful. Those things are important in addition to working on security. And I hope, sir, with all due respect, that your prediction doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah. I think the last speaker makes a very good point. The issue about truth being, the truth part being fundamental. But it also leads to think about this issue of transitional justice. Because the truth is one dimension, but the other one is we need to send signals to society that certain types of behavior or trends of behavior or violence will not be tolerated without fear or favor. Because you rightly pointed out the South Africa Truth and Reconciliation process, but the process in Liberia has not been as effective as that in South Africa. So in in Cote d'Ivoire, I'd like to submit that we think about truth, transitional justice, and reconciliation, because you do need that sort of mix. I'm not a lawyer or political scientist, but I just think, looking at Truth and Reconciliation Commissions worldwide, that the mixed results that we're seeing, that you need something that starts speaking to the institutional fabric, the legal fabric as well. I'm not sure how far off the mark I am, but I think that Cote d'Ivoire should focus on what is going to lead to A, the building of trust, and B, the forestalling of further violence. And if it's just truth, so be it. But if it's truth and some form of transitional justice that's impartial, then I'll think that that's possibly an option as well.
Mrs. Diomande?
Yes, I wanted to add that we all know that this crisis is mainly based on politics. So in order for us to resolve the problem, I think we should make it less politic, because to make it easier to resolve it. And I think it is impossible for us to make every single political party happy before we can even start to move ahead. It is impossible. So make it less political and think more about how we can move the country ahead. And we have another issue in Cote d'Ivoire right now. It seems like everybody's doing politics. You go to universities, you see the youth, they all get into politics because they think that it's easier for them to kind of maybe be successful in their life, which is very dangerous. So we have also to find some solution to it. Like I don't remember your name, Dr. Chapin says we have to Gilpin, sorry. We need to kind of focus more on the private sector, like you said. So and kind of bring more youth to get into the private sector, because like I said, they all are based or focused on politics, and that will resolve the problem for the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Diomande. Mrs. Diomande.
Good afternoon, my name is Scott Morgan. I'm with Ready Go Enterprises. I want to thank you all for an excellent presentation. Earlier this week, a representative from the UN mission in Liberia was at a think tank here in Washington. He actually came out and stated that the lack of the reconciliation process in Cote d'Ivoire is affecting and will continue to affect the situation in Liberia, because we all know former militia members are in the eastern primary Liberian. They're available for hire there across the river. The Liberian police is not able, or I should say, they're not willing to go in there and enforce the rule of law. So how do you jumpstart the reconciliation process to solve that? Not only violence, not only just breaks out in Cote d'Ivoire, but it also does not spread over into Liberia.
Mr. Ouattara claimed all along that you bring Ivory Coast to a crawl since 1999. And he did, with the support of the international community, starting with France and probably other countries that we don't know of. But now that he had brought Ivory Coast to a crawl, lying, claiming to be Ivorian is now. Claiming xenophobia in Ivory Coast is not right, because in Ivory Coast we have more than 30% of foreigners in our land since the beginning of 1960s. So, and people like Mr. Diomande and myself, we should not keep bringing forth the lies. We should stop the lies. Xenophobia, because you and me, we went to the same school. You and me, we're friends. All of us were friends. People from the north, people from the south. We didn't have that problem until the liar, I'm sorry, German came around our country, starting from 1993. So we have to stop lying. So we can have a real reconciliation. But there will never war between the Muslim and the Christian that we are. Never.
Okay.
So, I'm not done.
Are you not done? Okay. Go ahead.
For me, truly, for reconciliation to take place, the French the French government, the French military that's been in my country for more than 50 years have to get involved. They have to say the truth. And you and me, we have to say the truth also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, we do two questions, comment and question. Let the panel to reflect on it. Who's going to move it?
You know, I can't fundamentally disagree with anything that has been said. I think the issue of understanding the regional dimensions or regional implications of lack of progress in Cote d'Ivoire is huge. I think it adds an urgency. It adds an urgency not just for Cote d'Ivoire, but for Cote d'Ivoire and its neighbors. And you know, this is why I think, and we all need to be a lot more, I think we all need to be a lot more circumspect and try to get a process, start a process that makes sense for Cote d'Ivoire, that makes sense for the underlying factors, that also makes sense for the emerging threats, and not have a band-aid approach. It's very easy to have a quick band-aid approach, and let's have this institution, let's have this initiative, but as every speaker has said, this did not start over a 2-year period. We're talking about decades of issues that need to be resolved. And they're not going to be resolved over a 1 or 2 year period. So we have to focus on getting a process in place. And that, I think, would be important. The word truth keeps coming up over and over again. But I think also the issue of having a space where various angles or various approaches to the truth could be discussed and you forge a way forward is most important. Because that, I think, is crucial for this whole discussion and the country as a whole to move ahead. So I applaud this organization, I applaud the willingness for people with different shades of opinion to come and discuss really hard issues together.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on the first question with respect to UNMIL, the UN peacekeeping force in Liberia. And there's been, the positive thing coming out of this are reports, Security Council reports, even there's been some very positive collaboration between UNMIL and UNOSI and Cote d'Ivoire and working together. But it's going to take really those leaders, and there also has been, or there was in the past, and I have to investigate this point, but there also was very close collaboration between President Johnson Sirleaf and President Ouattara previously in this border issue. That has to be maintained. I don't know if the intervention of ECOWAS can help, and I think that ECOWAS as an outside player is not too, they're more acceptable in some instances than the West. And it's really important now, given what we see in Mali and what happened in Libya and all of the people who are armed going through Niger. I mean, it's big implications for the area. There has to be a lot of collaboration, and I'm hoping that there will be.
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in there very quick. Two things. Number one, about the question that the brother back, asked. In order for reinvention also to take place, I believe that the language needs to change, and that's also key. What I call language in here, and it's a call, I'm not even going to plea or to plead, but I'm urging we Ivorians to drop the so-called more than 30% of our population from neighboring countries or outside, and after us, the other country that has that is Senegal with 2%. And yet, we accept that we are xenophobic. This is not possible. I'm sorry to be excited, but that makes me very angry, because it's simply not the truth. So in order for us to counter that, wherever we the Ivorians, who have been the land of hospitality, it is even inscribed in our national anthem, and we practice that. I'm from the South. And that's the testimony of small anecdote. My father went to school, he was hosted in his own area by families of people coming from the north. And when I say north, I mean the north of the Ivory Coast and even the north of the Ivory Coast. So we need to kill, eliminate this kind of language and tell whoever is attributing that to us that we are on the right. So in terms of language, we need to kill that, and I think I agree with him on that. In terms of the Liberian issue, the ECOWAS to begin with has proven, unfortunately for me, very weak. I don't want to say failure, but very weak. And I say weak in the latter days in terms of conflict resolution. Number one. Number two things we need to consider is that in my presentation, I mentioned the importance of regional integration to be a topic to be discussed in this national reconciliation process because our borders are porous, are weak, and no African country can sustain any attack from outside or control or patrol all their borders. And we have seen that even in the central part of Africa with the Congo. When the attack came in, it was impossible for Mobutu at the time to patrol the 7 borders that he had with other countries. And very easily, those we called the Bayamulenge at the time were able to penetrate Congo and overthrow his regime. It's the same thing that is happening. Between the Ivory Coast and Liberia, it is not new. The troops that fought against Samuel Doe were at times hosted in the Ivory Coast. And the same troops that fought against Charles Taylor also sometimes were hosted in the Ivory Coast. So there is an in and out penetration between these two countries as there is with other countries. The in and out penetration is not just with those militia or armed people, but also with populations. Because at the border of Liberia and the Ivory Coast, we share the same people. And when there is a clash on the Ivorian side, those people at the border flee into Liberia, sometimes to their families, to seek refuge. We have this in and out flow also. That is a problem for the Liberian government, or at times also for the Ivorian government. We need to take that into consideration. And the UN, the collaboration between the UNAMIR and the UNOC in the Ivory Coast, it has to be more than just be bystanders. We have not insisted that much on critiquing the UN and the UN troops or operations in both Liberia and the Ivory Coast, but especially in the Ivory Coast in recent years, but it has been more detrimental to the situation than helpful. Because earlier, there was a mention of what happened at the refugee camps. I mean, displaced people camps in Naibli, and the Amnesty International, mentioned and in the latest reports. But this was done right there, on the face, in the face, by the face, with the help of whatever of the United Nations troops. So these kind of things also needs to be addressed if we want to strengthen, actually, right, the border. So what needs to be done again? We need to jumpstart the discussion. All the refugees that are outside of the Ivory Coast need to be given clear signals again in terms for them to return back to the Ivory Coast. And this is very important. I want to end on that.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to mention something. During the presentation of Ms. Paulo, she came on again and again on the rule of law. And then she added, but she doesn't speak on behalf of the African society. But everybody knows that what she is saying on the podium is reflected on the organization. So I like this kind of, I don't know how to say that in English, but anyway, what I want to say is the rule of law applied to the constitution of the country. You mentioned that the Obama administration went by what the independent commission said, what the African Union said, what the ECOWAS said, but everybody knows in Africa, maybe in the year you don't know, everybody knows in Africa that the UN, I mean the African Union, is financed by the European Union, and they are going to do whatever the European Union asks them to do. So maybe you, as an organization, you should keep track of what's saying and not just say, the African Union said that. We know that the African Union can't have a decision. The same for the ECOWAS. They go by what Sarkozy went to the African Union and said, and the African Union bring back to the ECOWAS group. So my question is, and you didn't mention our Supreme Court, which is the
Constitutional Court.
The Constitutional Council, which is our Supreme Court. So whenever the Constitutional Court or the Constitutional Council has said something, we go by that. And this has been said in Cote d'Ivoire, and the international community ignored it. So which means that the international community doesn't even respect our constitution. So can maybe the African society try to help us so that this international community can respect our constitution, respect our text. This is the beginning of security, and this is the beginning of democracy. So because you mentioned that the rule of law is just this phrase, it doesn't mean anything if the constitution is not respected.
Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Ambassador, first of all, I appreciate hearing your views, and I understand your frustration. The second thing is, well, no, but I know that there are certain phrases that are used all the time, and I understand and I've read about your constitutional court. But if people don't adhere to its mandates, it might as well not exist, or there has to be some reinforcement of the determinations that are made from it. But first of all, let's go back to what you said. I am the president of the Africa Society. We have a board. Many learned Africans are on that board, and our board are comprised of all men. I'm sure that not everyone will agree with the positions that I take. The second thing, so I'm just a person. I can't represent a society that's comprised of a lot of people. I have my own views. The second thing is, we have an ambassador to the United States who was on the ground in Cote d'Ivoire. And so the United States ambassador reports to the Department of State.
Okay, we're gonna let her finish, please.
Okay, but wait.
You're reading.
But wait a minute.
You're reading press. You know that the ambassador, I'm in the country, and I'm hosted by a country, I don't want to say things. But you know that the ambassador of the United States went and picked up the president of the Electoral Commission to the headquarters of Mr. Ouattara. And this is against the law of the United States. You can't, as a president of the African Society, can't you denounce that and say that the ambassador of the United States is on the ground reporting? If he reports something which is wrong, can you help us to denounce that?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Let me just say something. Ambassador, you give me too much credit. I am one person, and we in the United States, as with your country or with many countries, we rely on our officials and the people who are posted there as a source of information, in addition to working within the United Nations in some sort of international sort of determination about any given situation, not only in Cote d'Ivoire. And so it is not my place coming here. I came here to represent my views and my work that I did with Cote d'Ivoire Watch. And so I'm not here then to be critical of my government or to be critical of the United Nations. I was here to speak on a subject and advance my views on that subject. They may differ from yours, certainly. If I had sufficient evidence, or if I had the, to investigate this further, I've amassed all the information from the National Security Council, from the human rights reports, from the BBC, from the New York Times before I came here to read it, so as to have a learned understanding of the situation. But you are an Ivorian. You have a different understanding, you have different views, and you too have a background that's far more comprehensive than mine. So I just want to say that this should not engender any kind of hostility. It's just an exchange of views with an eye from all parties to the restoration of some kind of stability.
We are talking about reconciliation in Cote d'Ivoire today, and we're trying to see different perspectives and how to go forward on the perspective. But what the latest news that have been coming to us here in the U.S. As we discuss this are not good in terms of the free men. I'm talking about in the Cote d'Ivoire, it became totally impossible to gather. And the little incident is either the FBI, known as the Front Populaire Ivoirien, since last year tried to gather to do some meetings, and those meetings been forbidden by the government. So I would like somebody to give me a sense of how this can contribute to the reconciliation process, if really the government really wants reconciliation.
Let me say this very quick. In my presentation, I made that the reason why what we call the reconciliation process, to buy into that language as a stalled, is because of the unwillingness of the government, the current regime, to foster this reconciliation with the two antithetical actions. On the one hand, you have this speech that is made. Remember, for instance, in 2012, January 2012 in Paris, Mr. Ouattara claimed that everybody would be brought to justice, but at the same time, the same day you return to the Ivory Coast, some people were arrested. At the same time that you have this first round of talks between him and the political party of Mr. Laurent Gbagbo, right? A week after the end of that talk, and the conclusion being submitted to the current Prime Minister, you have this gathering of young people from the FPI that has been disbanded or not even allowed to run a day before, right? It took place. How can that contribute to not allowing reconciliation? The answer is there. The same people who are angry and who are claiming that we are witnessing a victim's justice in the Ivory Coast, lack of the rule of law, lack of freedom of expression, these are the illustrations of that. Let me tell you that what I call the constitutional revival in the Ivory Coast, which took place between 2000 and 2011, which means under President Gbagbo, has shattered away. Why? Even in a country split into two, with the crisis that we had, the opposition parties were still receiving public funds to run, because it was constitutional. Even with this, opposition party members or party leaders were granted protection. All those things are in existence today. And if you want, the FPI and any other party are today reduced to be underground political parties. You understand? The fact that there is an inability for these young people to meet, as it was the case before, it should be the case in a democracy, says a lot about the political atmosphere that we have, the antagonism, the acrimonism, as I said, that's my word for that now, because it's beyond animosity now, okay? All those things are actually stalling and contribute, again, to stall the reconciliation process, if there is one at this time. That's the answer I want to provide to your question.
Anybody want to say something about it? Anybody?
No, I'll just say that there are two things that stand out, I think, fundamental and important. The first is trust. Second is truth.
Thank you. And any conclusion that maybe Mrs. Demande or Mrs. Paolo want to make a couple of seconds?
The fact that we all, like some people try to find out who is wrong and right, or who won or who lost. For me, we don't need that right now. We don't need that. We have to focus more on what can bring us together. In French, we say l'eau qui est versée ne peut plus être ramassée. When you have water on the floor, you cannot take it anymore. Just, we have to turn the page and start writing a new chapter. For Cote d'Ivoire, think about those kids. You're not gonna put, like, in danger the life of those kids just for your own profit. It is time that we forget all these things and think about the future. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Demande. Mrs. Paolo?
I mean, I think that Bintu's remarks, I'll associate myself with her remarks because I think that they were right.
Thank you.